Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Jackson, for your work, Administrator Jackson, and for your willingness to always be accessible to folks in every community in this country. Last year, we spoke about the ongoing issues with PCB contamination in New York City schools and also in aging school buildings around the nation. I'd like to resume briefly that conversation and see where we are with that difficult issue. To be totally clear, since those preliminary tests, we have found that this toxic carcinogen is leaking in every New York City public school building that has had its lighting inspected to date, and they have also been found in the window caulking of numerous school buildings across the city. I have learned a little about the specific remediation procedures the Education Department submitted to the EPA for review and comments last month. I have to say that what I learned about them makes the plans sound inadequate. From what I understand, the lighting ballast replacement is based on a visual inspection, which has been proven to miss the vast majority of leaking PCBs. The caulk remediation revolves around repairing broken caulk, but leaving the unbroken PCB-laden caulk in place and simply opening windows or upgrading the air system to increase airflow and lower the levels of PCBs in the area. As described to me, these plans are seriously deficient, and when combined with the overly long timeline, leave our children in serious dangers of exposure to these terrible chemicals. So if you would please explain what the EPA is doing to ensure that these chemicals are safely and quickly taken out of the schools in New York City, I'd appreciate it. Will you be issuing further guidance on these plans? I'm sure that you agree that we need to treat this as an urgent problem that demands a fast, effective, and comprehensive solution.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Thank you for noting that EPA has been involved over the years since we last spoke about it. As you know, over the past year, EPA itself inspected New York City schools to look for the ballast issue to determine if they had leaked in the past or are leaking. The inspections did find numerous leaking ballasts with PCBs concentrations above the regulatory limit, including some with levels exceeding 600,000 parts per million. Now, that's from the ballasts themselves. New York City announced its plan in 2011 to replace all lighting ballasts in 772 schools and has allocated capital in its budget. My understanding is over 10 years. EPA has commented that we believe that accelerating the pace to 5 years was more reasonable. EPA did indeed, as a result of what it learned, issue national guidance to recommend that schools across the country take steps to reduce potential exposures to PCBs from older fixtures. And New York City has certainly addressed those leaking ballasts that EPA, at the schools that EPA inspected or sampled. They've completed removal at 64 schools. And they've, I think, put on fast track or prioritized 138 additional schools that they know have leaking ballasts right now. There's been, caulk is certainly a separate issue. We actually started this worrying more about caulk, if you recall, and then it came to realize that the leaking ballasts were perhaps a more urgent issue. Less is known, I think, about the contribution of caulk versus ballast, but as you heard from the number 600,000 parts per million, I think the city's focus and our focus has been primarily on the ballast, where we know that we have pretty high concentrations of PCBs.
Now, I'm one of those members of Congress who has great trust in your abilities and your vision and your determination that something is going right or going wrong. So my question to you is, are you satisfied, are you comfortable with the direction that New York City is taking in this particular issue and dealing with this problem?
Well, I think our office...
Or are there things that you're trying to push them along that you could say in public?
Well, no, I just said publicly the one place where I think we've had the most discussion, which is whether or not there's an opportunity to accelerate addressing the lighting issues. And that comes up, I think, often, and I think that Judith Enck and her staff in the Manhattan office have gone the extra mile to be responsive and point out and look for, even physically inspecting and sampling this situation. The only other thing I'd say is that there is some measure of additional information that we will learn as we go. One thing that the city did last year, as you recall, is agree to study and understand as it did sampling, put together a report so that other school districts could learn from work they had done as well. And so it is a difficult problem because of funding, but I do think that their focus on ballast is right, and I do think that for CALK, one of the scientific questions that would be good to know the answer to, I don't believe we know it, is what's the relative contribution from CALK compared to this huge source we know we have when you have a leaking ballast, sir.
Right, and I would hope you continue to try to convince New York City to move on this quickly. And secondly, just to remind you that we first started out looking at what effect this had on children. As the chairman, we later found out that, of course, it had an effect on teachers. But then recently we found out the effect that it would have on female teachers of, just to inform you, of childbearing age, and that became even a more difficult situation to lose. So I hope that you stay on this and don't let them just deviate from this issue.
Thank you. No, we have obligation under law, but we are also, I think the region has been willing to go the extra mile, and thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I have another question that I probably will submit for the record. I want to take one minute here to tell you a very quick story and something that I need to do because this is the EPA hearing, and we won't have another EPA hearing this year. 38 years ago, I was elected to the State Assembly, and when I walked in for orientation in December of '74, I met a young man who I quickly became friends with. And this young man quickly began to tell us about environmental issues. And being from the Bronx, New York, I knew very little about environmental issues. I quickly learned, and he became our leader, and then he became chairman of the Environmental Protection Committee in the State Assembly. And that young man has decided not to run for re-election. In the Bronx these days, I have a reputation of being some sort of an environmentalist. I wouldn't know 1/10 of what I know had I not paid attention to him starting in December and all the years that we've served together. And I want to say to you, Maurice Hinchey, that your impact on our state, on this country, and on me has been tremendous. And we will have many times to say thank you to you before the year ends. But this is the hearing where you introduced me to these issues 38 years ago. And I don't dye my hair, I must tell you, just in case you're wondering. But you and I have been together a long time, and you've been special, and I know we're going to miss you in this Congress. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me echo that congratulations and thanks to Mr. Hinchey also. I wasn't there 38 years ago. I was barely born.